Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. So not only is Nick not in the intro, but Andrew's not here. Andrew is currently dying from a migraine, so forgive the title saying Night Vision Nerd Strike Again. We're going to do a very quick pivot to a secondary topic, and we'll have to save Night Vision Nerds for when Andrew can come and join us, because,
Well, that way at least 2/3 of us have night vision to talk about.
Hey, I am one half hour away from meeting your wife and encouraging you to make horrible financial decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting close on the old fund, but it's going to be a minute.
I see a lathe in the back that you probably could have sold for a nice set of knives.
Oh, I will not sell this lathe. This lathe is a family heirloom at this point. I mean, I've got, thanks to Sugar Daddy Trump, I've got the night vision capable helmet, but I'm missing the PIC 15 and the PVS 14s, but we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, well, hopefully Andrew and I can give you some things to think about when we get there, because, like,
oh yeah,
there's within that whole realm of night vision, like getting the night observation device, or the getting your PVS 14 or your binos is just the first step down the rabbit hole of financial malfeasance, because everything, even sideways related to night vision, is a couple $100.
Oh yeah. I mean,
it's freaking stupid.
Hey, you know what? Warhammer, guns, PCs, all my hobbies are stupid expensive. Why not make shooting and night vision another one?
So what I'm hearing is that the old adage is true, that men do not grow up, they just get more expensive toys.
Oh yes. Oh, absolutely yes.
I don't know why our wives put up with this. I'm sure there's some reason that it's escaping me right this moment.
Night vision's cool.
Yeah, I will say this much. At the Matter of Facts camping trip, we did see a meteor flying across the sky.
Nice.
And it wasn't visible to the naked eye. You could only see it with night vision.
It
was like, and you know how normally when you see a shooting star, it blasts through the atmosphere really fast. It's like in and out in a couple of seconds. This thing was the perfect angle that it was visible for about 3 minutes. And it had to just like barely skipped across the top of the atmosphere, because it left a tail, like it left this long streaking tail as it went. But the only reason I saw it was because so before we get to topic, I was sitting there BSing with Andrew. We were on the back porch of the cabin, and I was checking out his night vision, because he's got binos and I have a PVS 14, and it's a little different.
Oh yeah.
And I'm talking to him while he's I'm looking at him, talking to him, and over his shoulder I see it, and I'm like, holy Christ, is that a meteor? And he turns around and says, I don't see it. So I grabbed his helmet off my head, did this, and shoved it on his head, turned around and grabbed mine and put mine back on. And we're sitting there nerding out over this meteor. And then I'm like, my wife is a science nerd. She will flip her freaking lid. So I bolt into the cabin. I'm like, babe, there's a meteor out here. And she looks up. She's like, I don't see it. And put the night vision on, and then she can see it. And I managed to get a picture of it, because the iPhone, I know the 15 Pro, because that's what this is. And I think the 14 Pros and maybe the standard 14s and 15s all have a long exposure mode on the camera.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the night camera.
Yeah. Well, that managed.
The Androids do too now.
That just managed to catch that meteor in the sky, but you still couldn't see it with the unaided eye. It was like the perfect way to cap off the camping trip, and in my mind justify a not healthy amount of money spent on a night vision unit.
Well, yeah, but I mean, where else do you get to have that kind of fun for that kind of money?
Cocaine.
Well, I mean, yeah, but that's not a one-time investment.
No. So I thought, despite the title, if everybody will forgive me, I thought we would talk about preparedness around driving, or driving preparedness. So this is going to be a mix of This is going to be a mix of like over the road recovery, pre-trip checks, how to stay out of trouble, and what to do in your vehicle if you get into trouble. So I'm going to pull from like, some general preparedness knowledge, like air up your tires and check your oil, nonsense like that everybody ought to know. And I'm even going to dig nice and deep about 20 years back into my history when I took combat convoy training, which is basically teaching idiot soldiers how to use Humvees like loaded weapons. It's the exact opposite of defensive driving. Defensive driving is don't hit stuff with your vehicle and don't get hit by other vehicles. And combat convoy training is you're sitting in a 5,000-pound weapon.
You might as well use it.
You might as well use it, or somebody else is going to. So let's start. Let's start with something that might be a touch difficult to watch. It's on our Instagram for those who saw me share it the other day. It was a road rage incident, but it's like very indicative of one of the things I bring up when I talk about preparedness around your vehicle. Like, it's the fact of the matter is there's crazy people out there. They do crazy things. And, like, I know, Nick, that like down here in the New Orleans area, carjackings went through the ceiling in the past 24 months.
Yep.
Property crimes are through the roof. A lot of people are in their vehicles. And like, I don't know why it is we behave the way we do in our vehicles, but we totally lose sight of the fact that we're sitting in a hardened shelter and that shelter is mobile.
Well, I think two big things about that. Most people do not want to run a person over with their car. I think that's a big part of it. It's like you've been spending your entire adult history driving, trying not to run over people, animals, random debris in the road, hitting other cars. I mean, your natural impulse is to do the exact opposite of using your vehicle as a self-defense tool.
I'll give you that one. I'll chalk that up to kind of like
conditioning.
I was going to say social programming, but same thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
it's just standard classical conditioning. I mean, if you look at even just look at what happens anytime you do anything involving an insurance claim on your house or your car. What happens? You get punished for it by higher insurance premiums. And so what you do is you have a classic negative, what is it? No, wait, technically that'd be a positive reinforcement strategy where you are punished every time you damage your vehicle, and you're punished anytime you hit anything with your vehicle.
You might have been thinking negative feedback loop. Do something, consequences are negative.
Yep, negative feedback. It's a negative feedback loop trying to get you to avoid doing exactly what would probably be the easiest and most expedient solution.
Which under normal circumstances I would say are fair until you get to this, which is not normal.
No. Not normal, but common.
I don't think I gotta grab the audio with this, which is unfortunate, but it almost doesn't matter. Like what you have here is
the audio.
Yeah. What you have here is somebody who is absolutely beating the crap out of the vehicle, acting irrational, and probably scaring the holy hell out of the driver in the process.
More than likely. This is very similar with one key difference to another one you shared most recently, and I wasn't sure which clip you were going to bring up. There was a guy that gets out of a car with a pistol and starts angrily approaching another vehicle, strikes the vehicle multiple times, transitions the pistol from his dominant hand to his non-dominant hand, and then pulls up his dominant hand to punch the window. And he eats two in the dome. We talked about it once on here already.
Yep.
Situation could have ended the same way. If you've got family in the car. Now, granted, this car had a clear roadway ahead of them. Why are you sitting there?
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, there are some people that fight, flight, or freeze. They freeze. And in some circumstances, one is better than the other. But, I had almost this exact situation happen when I was 16 and driving to high school on an icy morning. I made a turn, lost it a little bit on the turn, got a little close to the vehicle in the other lane. That driver, instead of realizing that I had lost control of my vehicle a little bit, I didn't hit them, but I got close to them in their lane, and they pulled a U-turn and started following me to school. When I got to a stoplight, I did not realize they were following me. They pulled in front of me, stopped just close enough that I couldn't move my car between the car behind me and the car and this now new car in front of me, and started beating on the side of my Jeep Wrangler. Now, I just waited until they hurt themselves enough or got cold enough that they left, because thankfully this person wasn't strong enough to break through my side window. But I mean, really, it's an icy road in the winter in Illinois. People lose control of their cars a little bit all the time. Now, first off, why are you getting that enraged that you follow someone? You don't know who that person is in the car. It might be the guy that's in this video here who just sits there and lets you beat up their car. But it might be the other guy in the other vehicle that decides, okay, this is a deadly threat, and I'm going to assume they are trying to kill me, and then fight back accordingly.
So I guess let's unpack like your situation and what was shown in this video. Like, first and foremost, before the altercation even begins, and I'm going to speak from a bit of personal experience, because some of this is stuff like I was taught in defensive driving. Some of it is stuff that I was taught by the Army. And it is all things I've talked to my wife about, and to a lesser degree my daughter, because she's not quite a driving age yet, but I'm trying to stack the things in her brain pan that she's going to need eventually.
Get it started. She's not far off.
Yeah. And the first thing I tell everybody is, if you're driving, I encourage everybody to have your windows up. I mean, that's not that much of an issue down here in South Louisiana, where it's 100 and FU outside most of the year, and most people have their windows up and their AC on, anyway. But I encourage people have your windows up. That gives you some shelter. Have your doors locked while you're in motion. A lot of people, some vehicles spoil people, and like as soon as you put it into drive reverse, it locks all the doors. Some of us drive Toyotas, and Toyota doesn't believe in doing anything automatically for their drivers. You have to do everything manually, which I prefer, honestly. I like my truck stupid and me smart. Like, it just makes me feel better. But lock your doors, roll up your windows. You're now sitting in a 3,000 to 5,000 pound hardened shelter.
Yep.
That, as you've already said, is not easy to break into.
No.
So that's number one. Two is, like most of us were taught when we first learned to drive, like, you're not supposed to just stare straight through the windshield. You're supposed to like look down at your gauges, which you should do for various reasons every so often. You should check your mirrors. You should maintain situational awareness of everything outside your vehicle. That rear view mirror is there for a reason. The side mirrors are there for reasons. And if you see the same grill for a period of time, that's something I pay attention to.
Yep.
I've gone so far, like if someone follows me through multiple turns, again, I've had some interesting life experiences growing up.
Time to start reading license plate numbers.
No, very simply, I make three right turns.
There you go.
And if you follow me through 3 right turns, the odds of you making 3 right turns and getting back out on the road going the same direction are exactly not happening.
Yeah.
So if you make that series of right turns with me, you are 100% following me. And that is going to substantially alter the way I drive, I deal with things, I proceed along my path. The first thing it's going to do is that I'm not going to allow myself to get boxed in. To your point, you stopped at a stop sign, didn't realize he was following you. He whipped around you and cut you off.
Stoplight, but yeah.
Stoplight.
Yeah, same principle applies.
Yeah. Now, sometimes you're not going to have an opportunity to kind of see that coming. You're going to get boxed in, or someone's going to follow you and you just can't help it. I'm just giving people like tools in the toolbox trying to
absolutely.
avoid it.
I definitely made mistakes, and I'll talk about them when you get through yours.
Yeah. But like I said, watch your rearview mirror, check if somebody's following you. If you think someone is following you, do what I just talked about. Make a couple of turns, get right back, go in the same direction you are. If they follow you through all that, they are following you, period, end discussion. At that point, if I'm heading home, I'm not going home. I'm not going to lead that person that's following me back to my home. If I'm going to a friend's house, not going to my friend's house anymore. I'm not leading that person to another person who's going to have to deal with their crazy. I am probably going to go to the nearest police station, and you follow me into that parking lot if God wills it. Or I'm gonna head to a very public place with lots of bystanders, and that way I have witnesses for whatever's about to happen.
Or at least
But I'm
security
not,
cameras.
yeah, but I am not going to, I'm going to alter my path and behavior because now someone's obviously following me. Another thing I tell my wife all the time is that if you are on a 3-lane road, if you're on a 2-lane road, I like to be on the right lane. Because I have a side road, I have an emergency lane, I have a curb, I have somewhere to go to escape. If I am in the left lane and someone pulls up next to me and boxes me in, and my only option is driving oncoming traffic to get away from a violent encounter, I haven't left myself a lot of good options. I like the right lane. If you're in a 3-lane road, I like the far right lane. If I'm in the center lane, I'm going to eat that and be a little more vigilant of my surroundings because I don't have as many escape options. The other thing, and this is a really simple trick, and it's good to prevent you from having an accident, but it's even better for preventing someone from being able to box you in. The absolute best thing you can do to guard yourself against getting boxed in by somebody is when you pull up on the vehicle in front of you, you stop when the highest point of your vehicle you can see, which is like the top of your hood, the top of your grill, when that touches the bottom of the tires in front of you. That one trick works on almost every vehicle I've ever been in, and it leaves about a third of a car length between you and the vehicle in front of you. That's enough room
to get out. Yeah.
That is enough room to cut your wheel hard right or hard left and get out from behind the vehicle without having to hit them. It is enough room to gain momentum to push another vehicle if you have to. It is room to maneuver, and it works across all vehicles. Trucks are higher up off the ground, so you stop further back. They have wider turning radiuses. Like this,
They do.
This simple trick works across the board. But what it's designed to do is to make sure that if I have to cut my wheel hard right or hard left and I have to move, I don't have to push the vehicle in front of me to do it.
Yeah.
What else? We've talked about escape routes. We've talked about leaving room. We've talked about momentum. Oh, speed is safety.
Yeah.
The most dangerous time for you in a vehicle is when you are stopped. That is when you are the most vulnerable. It's when you have the least mass speed momentum. It is when there is a greater likelihood that somebody on foot can approach your vehicle and attempt to pull you out of it. Yep. Speed is life. If you feel threatened, even to the point where, like, if you're pulling up on a red light, it's been red for a minute, start slowing down prematurely, and you'll piss off the guy behind you. He'll get over himself. But try to roll up on that stoplight and time it so that you spend the least amount of time stopped as possible. Or potentially, if you drag your ass just a little bit, light might be green by the time you get there, and then you don't have to stop at all. It's a lot of like really simple tricks to maintain your safety while you're in a vehicle. And the most important thing to remember, the thing that would have saved this driver a lot of pain and aggravation, is if you have a clear lane in front of you and you have a violent person outside the vehicle, there's this skinny pedal on the right side of the floor.
Stomp it and leave.
Stomp it and leave. Especially if they leave the door open, take the door and keep going. If they didn't leave the door open, sideswipe the side of the vehicle and keep going. I would rather, there's an old saying in the self-defense world, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. I would rather go stand in front of a judge and explain why I pinned this guy between my vehicle and his vehicle after he was beating the crap out of the side of my truck, than have him potentially break a window and enter my vehicle and harm me or harm my wife and daughter. I will go stand in front of the judge and say, hey, especially if I got dash cam footage or I got witnesses.
Oh, yeah.
Discussion over. Judge, Your Honor, absolutely. With all respect, he was beating on my window trying to get into my vehicle, so I cut the wheel hard right and I hit him.
Yep.
And he stopped.
Especially if you have a minor in the vehicle with you. Because now it is not your safety that is the priority. It is the safety of the minor.
Yep.
And good luck finding a jury that's gonna disagree with you, especially if it happened to be, instead of you driving the vehicle, your wife. What jury is on the planet is going to throw the book at a mother protecting her child from a violent aggressor using the vehicle, the only thing she had? Nobody's going to. And odds are it wouldn't even get that far, because the DA is going to look at his conviction rate and go, yeah, this is a loser. Free to go.
Well, and if we live in a place with common sense, the DA is also going to look at that situation and say, I don't want to be the one to put a mother up on trial for this.
Oh, exactly. It just looks bad for them.
With any luck, that person who got hit would get laughed at of every personal injury lawyer in the area, because they're going to say, okay, you got out of your vehicle, you were kicking their door, you were beating on their windows, they hit you, you want me to sue them because you had a case of road rage you couldn't control.
Well, that would still have a potential for winning in my state, unfortunately.
Yeah. But again,
it would, because all they have to prove is that so what is it? It takes away reasonable doubt when it's a civil case. They only have to prove that you had
preponderance of evidence, I think.
There's a preponderance of evidence that you had another possible option of action. So, for instance, if that lane was clear ahead of you and you chose to swerve and hit the person, you could probably get sued, and you're probably going to end up paying some money. Well, your insurance company is probably going to end up paying a bunch of money if you're not criminally liable.
Torque steer. My alignment was off.
Yeah.
My right front brake caliper was hanging.
Oops. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you could maybe squeeze your way out of it, depending on your state and depending on the judge you got. But I mean, if there's a clear lane, bam, it's a car. Okay, he dented your car up.
Yeah, and understand for the audience, like, I am not criticizing this driver. This is this is 100
freeze, and it's involuntary.
Yeah, well, I mean, and like, I hate to say it this way, but like, we know this from the veteran community. This is well known in the first responder community. No one knows how they're going to react faced with violence until the day comes, and by then, whatever is about to happen is about to happen. You can do certain things, though, to build kind of like mental, emotional shortcuts in your brain to try to circumvent that. And that's why I Monday morning quarterback these kinds of things.
Exactly.
That's why I talk about these kinds of things on the show occasionally, because what I want people to understand that if you're faced with this, you have an alternative, you have a plan.
Yep.
And you can execute the plan without fear as a reaction. The greatest example I use for this is that my daughter is 12. She was taught, I don't know, like 6, 7, 8 years old, fairly young, as I'm sure most people teach their kids, or I hope they do. If you hear the fire alarm go off, you run to the mailbox. Mailbox is far enough away that you ought to be safe there. Yeah. And I told her, if you get to the mailbox and you feel the heat of the fire on your face, you go across the street to the neighbor's house, because that's twice the distance.
Exactly.
And if you can still feel the heat of the fire from the neighbor's house, we have a whole different set of problems. But, that's your plan. And the thing she asked me was, what about you, Mom? And I said, my responsibility is to get you out of the house. My responsibility is to get Mom out of the house. My responsibility is to get me out of the house. What I need you to do is to make my life simpler by knowing you're not hiding under your bed, you're not hiding in your closet, you're at the mailbox. So when I get to the mailbox and you're there, we're golden, and I don't have to run back into the house to find you. Because I will, Perfect. But I'd rather not.
Exactly.
Well, my brother-in-law and my sister were over hanging out with us one evening. They were cooking in the kitchen. I swear to God, when somebody invents a fire alarm that shuts up if you holler, I'm just cooking, they'll be a freaking billionaire. But something got a little smoky and the fire alarm went off. My daughter asked 0 questions. She didn't question anything. She didn't stop. She bolted through the house, ran right behind my wife and my brother-in-law out the front door, and didn't stop till she got to the mailbox.
Perfect.
And left my wife standing there. Now, my sister is a paramedic. My brother-in-law is a sheriff's deputy. As soon as the fire alarm went off and she bolted out the house, they both knew what happened. And they were like, you taught that kid right. Like there was no fear. There was no panic. She wasn't scared. She just knew fire alarm went off, go to the mailbox.
Yep.
I'll ask questions when I get to the mailbox. So that's why I talk about these kinds of things, because the point is, if the fire alarm goes off and you have to ask what the plan is, that's when people freeze. But if you have a plan, if you know what your options are, if you're thinking about this ahead of time, then when the fire alarm goes off, you run to the mailbox because that's what you've already kind of like predispositioned your brain to do, and you don't freeze. Hopefully.
Exactly. Well, that's why we do fire drills in schools.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why maybe a thing you should consider if you are teaching someone to drive is a drill regarding an aggressive driver, or a drill regarding a violent person getting out of their car, or a carjacking. Now, you mentioned New Orleans has a lot of carjackings right now. Chicago does too. Rockford, another major city by me, they do too. If you guys follow the news around there, a lot of the shootings in Chicago happen in, around, and near vehicles, sometimes done via drive-by, sometimes done by people walking. But I mean, it's Chicago. There's always some traffic going by. And the safest place you can be in a gang-involved shooting when you're not the target is moving as quickly as possible, because less time you're in the environment.
Mm-hmm.
My mistake that I made, I didn't realize the person was following me. It was morning. I was tired. I was focused on getting to class. I was a teenager that wasn't paying attention.
But you were also a teenager who was contending with icy roads, so your focus was on keep this thing on the road.
Exactly. Yeah. I was doing the safe driver thing of trying to maintain control of the vehicle. I was not paying attention to the person that was driving probably pretty aggressively behind me, judging by the fact that they got in between me and a car in front of me at a stoplight in a turn lane. Mm-hmm. So probably were following pretty close. Should I have noticed it? Absolutely. I stopped far enough back that I thought that I would have probably been able to get out had they not dove the car in between us. But you can't account for all variables. You really can't.
Nope.
And I did the right thing and didn't engage or agitate them further.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those situations where it's like, with the benefit of hindsight, which is always 2020. Now you can look back at the situation and be like, oh, I have extra tools in the toolbox for next time.
Exactly.
But you still didn't make the situation worse, which you very easily could have.
Dumb teenage boy who's into weightlifting, I could have mouthed off. I could have opened the car door. I mean, come on. Teenage boys do all kinds of stupid stuff. I did all kinds of stupid stuff, just not that morning.
Thank Christ that cell phones didn't have cameras when you and I were younger.
Oh, they did though. I had the Razor with the camera on it when it first came out. There's a YouTube video of me somewhere getting lit on fire when I was lighting off some thermite.
My first cell phone was the brick, the one piece Nokia that will survive a nuclear blast. I had one.
Yeah, those things were fantastic, and they got better signal due to their longer antenna than a lot of modern phones. I mean,
you couldn't break them.
Exactly. They're very difficult to break.
I'm going to tell anybody that's a younger millennial or a Zoomer that ever watches this that never had the joy of having one of those old school Nokias, I'm going to tell you they could not be broken. If a nuclear war ever ends the human race, the only thing left will be like, radioactive snow, cockroaches, and just a mountain of old Nokias wherever they piled them all up when they stopped selling them. Like, they will survive anything. Yeah. Can't say they were the most high-tech things on Earth, but, they would take a beating.
They would. They did. They worked phenomenally, and their battery life was amazing. But, that kind of brings me back around to thinking about a topic, road recovery. When I first started driving, I did not have a cell phone. I'm sure you didn't either when you first started driving. I didn't get a cell phone, I think, until I was 17. But, I'm about to go on a road trip.
I was 19 when I got my first phone.
Okay. Yeah, so, pretty close. You had a couple of years of driving under your belt where you didn't have an easy phone call to make. we're going to be making, I think it's like a 560-mile drive, starting at 4:00 in the morning this Saturday. So, not going to go into specifics on it. It's a freeway drive most of the way. We'll be towing a trailer. Okay. On this, my family does this trip every year. Have been for the last, actually, I want to say more than 40 years now. But twice now on a trip up to this location, we've lost a wheel bearing on a trailer. All right. Wheel bearing is a very time sensitive thing to have go wrong. And I'm sure as a mechanic, you're familiar with that. Basically, your wheels can fall off if your wheel bearing goes bad enough, long enough. Yeah. So my dad has put together a toolkit for himself because 4:30 in the morning, 4:00 in the morning, there's not too many towing companies that are operating. There's not too many garages open. Napa's not open. And we're going on a Saturday. So, later in the day, everything's closed. You can pull a wheel bearing on the roadside if you have a basic jack. You can get the wheel off, and you have a few basic bearing puller tools.
3-jaw puller, probably.
Yeah, 3-jaw puller. Yeah. I think on this one, it's a 3-jaw puller and then a 3-jaw press. So you can grab behind the hub and pull it back on.
I mean, you're talking about probably not a solidly sprung axle on the trailer, but a solid axle. I mean, solid wheel axle. Bearing. So the wheel bearing system is pretty
basic.
Simple.
Super basic. It's a boat trailer.
It's a hell of a lot nicer than anything on a vehicle these days, or a hell of a lot easier to work on.
It's basically 2 washers, a non-press fit bearing, and a bunch of grease. Mm-hmm. So what we've gone to, at least on this trip, is in addition to our normal pre-road trip checks, which we'll talk about after this, my dad makes sure in his toolkit he has everything he needs to pull and repack those bearings, 2 full sets of bearings. I think the bearing races are pullable as well, and the washers that go either side of those bearings. Because when those bearings tend to go bad, those washers tend to warp, and then suddenly everything doesn't fit anymore. Yeah, because it tends to get awful hot and smoky. So now that takes it from
I don't want to derail you. What about a torque wrench, or do you do the old school way where it's like keep tightening while rotating the wheel until it drags and then back it off a little bit?
We since
German torque it.
Yeah, it's kind of German torque. Just windage torque. Drive a couple miles, check it, and retorque it if it starts loosening up. I mean, it's one of those things that me and him have never really used torque wrenches. We're tool makers. We just kind of windage it and hope for the best.
Nick.
I got torque wrenches for my guns, but I don't have torque wrenches for my car. I
shouldn't be the one rubbing my temples at that statement. Mm-hmm. Because I was just the grease monkey. You're the machinist.
Oh, I am. But see, the beautiful thing about that is most of the stuff I build does not have torque specs. It really doesn't. It doesn't have torque specs. I mean, when I'm working on a CNC machine doing repair work on that, yeah, we have to use torque specs and stuff like that. But for a roadside repair to get you up and running and to get you the last 50 miles, 75 miles, 100 miles. So if you've got to stop 2 or 3 more times and check the tension on things, it's not really that big of a deal. At home in the toolkit, absolutely there's torque wrenches. But torque wrenches are one of those precision instruments that you're not supposed to let bang around in the back of a truck on a 600-mile road trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't take impact super great.
So I shouldn't use mine as an impact device.
I mean, you can once.
Well, technically you can use it as many times that way as you want. It just may not be accurate afterwards.
Right, not if you want the torque spec to be maintained. I mean, single solid axle trailers, the torque spec is pretty wide on those. It's basically just torque it down so that it doesn't come loose. I mean, yes, if you over torque it, could you shear off those studs? Yes, but you're probably not going to do it unless you're putting a cheater bar on. I mean, I've never managed to, but I'm sure there's somebody that could.
I'm sure some. What is the saying you've used before? Everything. If you use anything wrong enough.
Oh yeah. If you can use anything wrong enough and start a fire, or if you use it wrong enough. Yeah. Most things work that way. But if you've changed a tire in your life, you can probably, with the help of a YouTube video, figure out how to pull a wheel bearing on a very simple trailer like that. But for a lot of people on road trips, they're not going to be towing a trailer. Or if they are, it'll be like a camper trailer, in which case, yeah, you're going to need to pack a heavier duty jack. You're probably going to need heavier duty torque wrench, tools like that. And you'll have the space to do that. But if you're not pulling a trailer, what's your standard vehicle checks? I'm not a mechanic. I don't do most of my standard vehicle checks. I have a trusted mechanic that before I do a road trip, so like if I'm just going across the state, okay, I'm not too worried about it. I'll do my normal check. I'll do my normal tire pressure checks, all the various fluid checks, check my battery voltage, make sure my spare's inflated, stuff like that. But if I'm going on a multi-state trip or a couple of 400 or 500 mile trip, I take my truck to the mechanic a week beforehand, a guy that I've known and been doing business with the entire time I've been driving. And I tell him, hey, I'm going on a road trip, do a full once over of my vehicle. If it needs a tire rotation, if it needs an alignment, if it needs wipers, whatever, I don't care. Do it. Most it's ever cost me is like $500 because 2 of my brake rotors need to be redone. But then I didn't end up doing 70 miles an hour on the freeway with roached out brake rotors.
Yeah.
So, I mean, would it have been a problem? Probably not. But say you happen to be going down the highway in the winter and one of those semis gets a crosswind hitting it on an icy patch and now it's suddenly blowing sideways across the highway. And you're in the middle of what's starting to be a 50-car pileup.
Yeah.
Having good brakes might suddenly become the most important thing in your life.
And I guess from my perspective, like what you're really doing with the trusted mechanic, or in my case, I am the trusted mechanic.
Exactly.
But what you're really doing is you're trying to sacrifice a little bit of time and or money to prevent a probable problem. And I say probable, not potential, because you're right. The brake rotors probably would have got you through the trip.
Probably.
But the problem is the average driver pays so little attention to their vehicle that if it doesn't screw you this trip, it's going to screw you next trip. So it's always so it's always the idea that like if you don't have that trusted mechanic, or if you're the kind of person that likes that DIYs their own maintenance, because like in the last year I've done a 4-wheel brake job on my wife's Jeep Grand Cherokee, which by the way has the heaviest damned brakes I've ever felt in my life.
Cherokees are overbuilt.
Yeah. Front brakes on my truck, suspension upgrade on my truck. That might have been it just for this year. But anyway,
you did like the battery upgrade, didn't you?
Haven't done the battery upgrade. We ran wiring for like the power panel on the back.
That's right. You ran all that wiring.
But I did a 4-wheel suspension job on the truck. Like I do a lot of my own work. You know, I'm actually
you have that knowledge and expertise.
Yeah, I'm probably going to be doing spark plugs in the very near future if I can ever get quit raining around here. But you know, like I do a lot of that, but I have like my own little system of checks, which really is just everything, because again, I do my own oil changes, I do my own maintenance, so I'm usually pretty in tune with what needs to be done on either one of these vehicles before we put them on the road for an extended period of time. So a lot of what I'm doing is I'm checking everything that should be fine.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Like if I have a ball joint or a tie rod end loosen up on my truck, I usually know about it because I drive the thing. If my wife knows
like that.
Yeah, my wife knows that if the Jeep starts making a weird noise or something feels wrong, like you need to let me know so I can go jump in and check it out, or jack it up and check it out. So I'm checking things like the oil level. Absolute simplest thing you can ever do is find your oil dipstick, pull it out, wipe it on a towel, shove it back in, wait 30 seconds, pull it out, and check to see where the level is. If it ain't where it's supposed to be, fix that right quick. Check all your fluids. Every one of those reservoirs either has a dipstick or it has a mark somewhere on the side of it where you should be able to
probably
very
have
quickly
to wipe it off to read it.
Potentially, yeah. But the point remains, if nothing else, pop the cap open, make sure there's fluid in there.
Yep.
Because even if the fluid's old, even if it needs to be flushed, even if it's wrong, it's better than being dry.
Yes.
So just check everything. Look under the hood and see if anything looks like it's out of place. Almost every engine has a belt running around either the side of it or the front of it that drives all your accessories. If
Yep.
that belt looks frayed, that's bad. Go get that dealt with. If the vehicle's making weird antisocial, I call them expensive noises like screeching,
Mm-hmm.
grinding, banging, go get all that fixed. Check, make sure your tires are at the right pressure. Single greatest thing other than to make sure your oil level is right that you can do to make sure you have a smooth, hassle-free trip. Get all your tires at the right air pressure. Check your tires, make sure they don't have any like bumps, knobs, or anything funny looking. I mean, like
Dry rot.
yeah. Well, and this is another thing. Like most people don't realize this. So when I used to work as a tire guy, when I was putting myself through college, I used to have this argument all the time with. I hate to make the generalization, but I'm going to. Usually it was with older customers
Mm-hmm.
who would bring in like their Lincoln, their Crown Vic, their enormous land yacht on a pair of Michelins that I know damn good well last 80,000 miles.
At 105.
No. They would have like 10,000 miles on them because they don't drive. They go from home to church to the grocery store and home. That's it. That's all they do. They don't go on long trips. They don't drive to work every day. They don't drive a lot. So I'm having to explain to them why their tires need to be replaced when they only have 10,000 miles on an 80,000 mile warranty
And the tread's
tire.
still good.
The tread looks great except for all the cracks down between the blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people don't realize, but on one side of the tire or the other, there's a stamped in code. And that code is the first two digits is the week, 1 to 52, that the tire popped out of the mold. The last two are the year. The NHTSA says that when tires are 5 years old from the date of manufacture, not the date of sale, because you run into this sometimes if it's a tire that sat on the shelf for a year because it's a weird size or it's just not a commonly sold brand, or maybe it's a secondary shop that bought somebody else's stock. From the date of manufacture, 5 years, and NHTSA says replace those tires. I'm going to tell you that by the time a tire gets 5 years old of sitting in the ozone and letting the sun eat it up, I don't care how much tread that tire has left, it needs to be yanked off the vehicle and replaced.
Absolutely. I've had that happen on my truck twice.
That's also why you see so many.
To that point again.
That's also why every spring you see so many boat trailers on the side of the road because the tires got low. The tires got low on pressure, leaking away in somebody's driveway, and the tires are old because they don't spin a lot. They just sit there, and then as soon as you get them out on the road, get them nice and hot, they pop.
Yeah, there's no quicker way to flip your vehicle than having a tire blow out at 70.
Yeah. Well, if you got a half-ton truck dragging a decent-sized boat on a trailer, like a tire blowout, it shouldn't be a world-ending experience, but it will be an exciting one, especially if you're dealing with a person who doesn't spend a lot of time towing a load behind their vehicle. The feeling of that trailer suddenly grabbing and yanking that vehicle will be eye-opening.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Especially if, say, you see a lot of this anymore nowadays is small and mid-sized SUVs towing 18, 20-foot bass boats.
Vehicles they have no right. I mean, yeah, vehicles that have no right.
By the weight, they can. Technically. Yeah. The trouble is by the mass of your car versus the mass of the boat is suddenly directing traffic.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you that I had this conversation with my wife fairly recently because she noticed another Grand Cherokee similar to hers that had a trailer, a hitch receiver on the back of it.
Absolutely.
Well, hers doesn't. And she asked me, why didn't I get that? And my response was because I looked up the max towing, the max pull load of your Jeep, and it's 3,500 pounds maximum.
Mm-hmm.
And I was unwilling to put would that be a class 2 hitch, class 3 hitch? I think it's only 1.5 inch receiver, but I was unwilling to put
I'm
that.
Not familiar. Yeah.
I was unwilling to put that behind your Jeep and then have your Jeep do the Carolina squat every time you put a load on the back of it because your rear suspension is sprung for having weight inside the hatch, not gimbaling off the back of the Jeep. As opposed to a pickup truck that can pull 6,500 pounds and now has enough rear spring to actually do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, and it's not even just rear spring. It is weight of your vehicle. Because the problem
Brakes.
is what a lot of, well, yeah, brakes too, for sure. But the ratio of weight of trailer you are pulling to weight of your vehicle. Once you get to the point where you're 1-to-1 or greater than the weight of your vehicle, now that trailer is going to be determining what your vehicle does instead of the other way around. Yeah, you can get away with it with some of the heavier duty trucks and whatnot with trailer brakes, but you can't with a light duty vehicle. And what people forget to take into account is the weight of the shit they put in the boat. Because if you're towing a boat and you've got a covered trailer, and basically is what it turns into, because now you got the topper on the boat to keep all the rain and bugs and debris out. Well, would be sure nice to have a little more room in the back of the SUV for the kids so they're a little less cramped. So we put all the crap in the boat. All right. How much does a family of five's random vacation crap weigh? Guarantee you haven't weighed it. So you don't know. Now you're over your towing limit.
Yeah. And on top of all that, like, I encourage anybody that makes that jump towards like pulling a trailer or pulling a boat, God forbid. Jim Rawls said that there was no notification when this went live. I'm not shocked by that at all. Not a bit. I put a post up on Instagram the other day that, okay, so Nick, you're a little bit familiar with Instagram, right?
Yeah.
I put up a post. Now, normally when you put up a post, depending on like the SEO and everything, like you'll get a certain percentage goes to your followers and a certain percentage goes to all.
Yeah, to people that have searched similar things in the past. It's the reason why I keep
Have you ever seen 100% followers, 0% non-followers?
I've never made a post on Instagram that I know that I remember.
I need to see if I actually saved that because I was absolutely shocked when I realized
don't think that's shadow banning anymore. That's just outright barring.
Oh yeah, here we go.
Oh, it's just all flared out. Oh, there it goes. Oh wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, Jim, I'm on the show and I don't get notifications that we're going live.
That is Meta giving me the great big old middle finger when
that's fine.
They say
I don't need them.
I don't either. I just think it's hilarious. So, Jim, to your point, I'm sorry you didn't get the notification. It ain't just you.
Nope.
But I'm hoping that if we keep doing this on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Central and 6 p.m. Eastern, like it'll become a habit. Yeah. And the fact that we're shadow banned to hell and back won't matter as much.
Yeah. I've been banned before.
I have never been kicked off of Meta. I've never been kicked off
Facebook a bunch. I've been kicked off Facebook a bunch. Apparently, sarcastically asking the president to drone bomb you harder is a bannable offense on Facebook. Because they were doing a bit of extra drone bombing.
Oh, Nick.
Yeah, well, what are they going to do? They only drone bomb American citizens in foreign countries, not in America so far.
So far.
That would be the president that got the Nobel Peace Prize before he ever took office.
Yeah. Anyway.
I won't read about that one on his Wikipedia page.
But like I was going to say before Jim sidetracked me, the only thing I say about it is if you're going to be pulling a trailer, pulling a boat, like, yes, to Nick's point, please pay attention to your towing limit, pay attention to the weight of load that's behind you, and also keep in mind, if you see your vehicle doing the Carolina squat, there's a couple of things happening. First of all, you have no rear suspension travel. You're resting on the bump stops or the overload leaves. The second thing is that your brake proportioning front to rear was built assuming your vehicle was at standard ride height. So when it's like this and all of the weight is on the back axle, when you hit the brakes, you don't have as much weight pushing down the front tires, which that difference in weight distribution, because you have so much of the vehicle, because the vehicle is postured up like that, completely screws up your front brake force, which is going to make you take even longer to brake than it would have otherwise, were that big old trailer or boat not pushing you down the interstate, because now you have X amount of brake and double the weight to stop. So this is just all me saying, if you put a load on the back of your vehicle, make sure it's not too much for the vehicle. Consider something like a weight distribution hitch or something else to kind of correct for that. Pay very, freaking close attention to your tongue weight, because a properly loaded trailer should not have a crap ton of weight on the front tongue. It should be kind of even, leaning a little bit forward, so that if the trailer disconnects from the vehicle, it doesn't do a backflip and then go through somebody's windshield. You want it to kind of like drop down onto the emergency chains. Like, I am by no means an expert in towing stuff, other than what the DoD taught me, and I've never gone wrong following all that knowledge.
Well, I was trained old school with how to tow trailers. They started me off on a lawn tractor, and then I was towing trailers behind tractors down the road, and then towing trailers behind trucks. You want to have enough tongue weight that you see the truck bed start to drop a little bit, and then you're good. I mean, if you get to know your vehicle, you'll know when too much is too much, and just adjust your load accordingly. I mean, everybody that owns a truck is overloaded at least once. I mean, you're going to do it to find out where the limits are. Just don't do it on a 600-mile road trip.
You say this to the person that put a 700-pound TIG welder in the back of a 94 Toyota pickup.
It'll be fine.
Oh, it was fine, but except for the fact that you're familiar with those vehicles. I'm assuming they're kind of small. They're on the diminutive side. Well, the TIG welder was 1.5 feet taller than the cab of the truck was.
Fantastic. That sounds like my kind of welder.
The fantastic part was, like, having to like really put the pedal down hard to get up to stay to 70 miles an hour, because I felt like the truck had a sail. I'd seriously felt like I was dragging a parachute the whole way back home. Like, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a thing that a lot of people don't consider, is the aerodynamics of what you're towing or pulling.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be huge.
Yeah, I mean, it'll screw up your gas mileage for sure, but it's also going to make your engine work harder. It's going to make your cooling package work harder. It's going to demand you pay a little bit more attention to the temperature gauge. It's going to demand that you make sure you're... Huh?
Does your truck have a transmission radiator?
Transpooler, yep.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, if you're gonna have a towing package, that's it's not a must-have, but it helps. It helps a lot.
And if you're going to be doing a lot of towing and your vehicle doesn't have a separate transcooler, it almost certainly has like one of those goofy little loops in the front radiator at a minimum. And it's not hard to like take those two hoses off and then mount somewhere in the front of the vehicle a little auxiliary.
They make an aftermarket one that's easy to mount. Yeah.
And if you're not comfortable doing it, find a shop that will do it. I mean, they're not expensive and they're not difficult to put on, but I'm gonna tell you that so my truck has like the factory transcooler, which is a radiator about yay big.
Yeah.
Not gigantic, but certainly helps.
Oh, it does.
And I have given thought to upgrading that to an even larger cooler, but mostly I've got a little meter called Scan Gauge that plugs in my OB2 port, and it lets me watch my water temps and my trans temps in real time.
Yeah, I've got that native in my dash.
Yeah, well, Toyota.
Ram.
Toyota sees those things as flippant luxuries to put on Lexuses, not Toyotas.
To be fair, on my truck, it is a flippant luxury. I don't tow stuff very much, but when I do, it's very heavy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't tow stuff ever. Like I don't tow stuff.
Yeah,
I haven't gotten to that.
But
point
all the
yet.
weight you put in for camping, you had to upgrade your suspension. Yeah,
600-700 pounds.
Okay, 600-700 pounds in a light duty pickup. You had to upgrade the suspension so the truck wasn't squatting. Your trans is working harder. It's going to be getting hotter.
Oh yeah. I can tell you definitively that like 2 years ago, coming home from prepper camp, there was a point at which I was watching those, because we were going through like a hillier area, which might sound funny to y'all, but like I live down here where there's no such thing as hills. So hills are still a novelty to me. But I was watching, and my water temp would creep up like, 100, like 188, 190, 191, 193. It'd get up to about 195 going uphill, and then as soon as we crest top of the hill and start coming down, it starts ticking back down. But the trans temp was doing this. Trans temp was doing the same thing. And again, I've got 500, 600, 700 pounds in the back of the truck plus 2 passengers. So like, it all bears in mind.
It's not inconsiderable.
Yeah. Now, I think that was right before I did a full coolant flush, thermostat, and trans flush on the truck,
Okay.
which hasn't really changed much, except it changed the operating temperature of the truck ever so slightly just because it was a brand new thermostat and they're all, they all have like a range.
Yeah, they're each different. Yeah. I mean, I'm not that familiar with thermostats on a truck, but thermocouples in a 3D printer, you have to calibrate your temperature readout to certain temperature resistivities across the thermocouple. I'm sure a car's is the same way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything has a manufacturing tolerance, but
Exactly.
the point isn't
Well,
that the truck stays 2 degrees hotter, 2 degrees cooler with the new thermostat. The point is, I went through the whole cooling package and trans package on the truck and refreshed everything.
And you probably made it a little bit more efficient.
Quite possibly, but for me, it goes back to the whole thing of like, did you have to get your brake rotors changed right then or not? And the answer is no, but sooner or later you were going to have to. And sooner or later, the way I use my truck is that, like, yeah, I do a bit of like around town and every now and then I commute to the office in it, but like it's my daily driver.
Sure.
But I'm going to tell you that 90% of the time when that truck comes out of the driveway, it is because I am loading it to the gills and we're going camping, and it's going to be working its butt off the entire way there and the entire way home. And potentially we might be like, doing lots of really short trips around the campsite, which by the way are horrible for vehicles, is to like start it, not let it run up to operating temperature and then shut it back down. But you wind up doing that because you're driving people to and from the bathroom. That's too far away to walk.
Well, it's a lot of people's commutes, honestly.
Yeah. So it really just comes down to like doing all that preemptively, preventatively, having that trusted mechanic, doing all those pre-flight checks. It is all about minimizing the number of things that can screw you over on the trip.
Yeah, exactly. If you take any of the possible problems out of the equation, you just make your life easier. And man, I'm all about making life easier, because you can be as prepared as you want, but if you're ignoring basic safety conditions, like when we get to talking about basic homeowners preparedness, fire extinguishers. The number of people I know that own houses 2 and 3 times more expensive than mine that have not a single fire extinguisher is insane. They cost less than $100 for a big one. Like, there's one sitting in the one of those drawers of the lathe behind me. I can't get to the point where you can see it, but what am I going to burn down my $200,000 house because of not having a $40 fire extinguisher? That's ridiculously insane.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with not taking your car to a mechanic. Look, we can all only be experts in so many things. We only have so much space in our brain. You've had the wonderful history of becoming a mechanic through the military and through your profession for a while. I'm a machinist. Man, I can take apart a Bridgeport. I can take apart that lathe, no problem. Whatever. I know precious little about small engines, and what little I do know is enough to keep my lawnmower functioning on most days. But even then, I know where my limits are. I'm not going to push it past that limit. I'm not going to let things get maintenance-wise to the point where I can't handle it without calling in an expert. Because if I need to mow my lawn on a Thursday, great. The grass is going to get taller. Now it's got to go to a shop. Now it's going to be 2 weeks to get it fixed and get it back. Now I got to either beg one of my neighbors to do it or hire somebody else to do it. It's just more expensive. The same thing with your car. The longer you let problems go unattended, the more expensive they get. I mean, how often have you seen a blowout on the side of the road, Phil? Probably couple times a year you see somebody stuck with a blowout on a road trip.
Easily.
Yeah, pretty much every road trip you go on, you see shreds of tire blown out along the road. Well, guess what happens when a front tire blows up when you're doing 70 miles an hour? It's probably going to take out your quarter panel. At the very least, it's taking out the front quarter panel. Worst case, it takes out something in your engine because a piece of that tire goes through that little plastic fender well cover and goes into your belt, pops the belt off, and now hopefully you don't have an interference engine, because if you do, now your valves are all smashed. And that is the extent of my mechanics knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me,
interference engines with no belt is very bad.
extremely. But I mean, just to kind of round this all out, it really just comes down to like, it really is the age old idea of like an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. And especially if we're talking about being on, like, you're going to be, I'm assuming, with your spouse.
Nope. Actually, she's staying home. This is a guy's trip.
Okay. But you're going to be going.
I'll be with my family, my brother, my dad, unfortunately not my grandfather because of his hospitalization, but 2 of my uncles and 1 of their sons.
But the point remains, you would much rather spend your time with family hanging out than on the side of the road cursing yourself for what you should have fixed in your driveway.
Exactly. Especially because what's a set of tires? $1,200?
Yeah.
Pedro Garcia pointed out, maybe it blows out your fender well, maybe you flip your car. Now you've totaled what is probably a $40,000 vehicle with modern pricing.
Yeah, that you'll have to replace
what would have been
like
$1,000 of tires.
That you'll have to replace at what, 7 to 12% interest?
Yeah, I think. Let's see. We bought my wife a new car recently, and I think they were saying the average interest rate, not what we paid, but the average interest rate was going to be something in the neighborhood of 8%. They said just be prepared because the interest rates have gone up. The average rate's about 8%.
No me gusta.
No, not at all. And that's, you and I mention it all the time. Personal finance is very important. Manage your personal finances, manage your credit appropriately, because then you can go away and find someone that will give you better.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing with finding a good mechanic. If you keep your vehicle in good condition and you notice a problem beginning, you have the time to go to that mechanic, the mechanic down the road, and the mechanic a little bit on the other side of town, to have 3 different people assess the problem, give you your 3 opinions and your 3 costs, aggregate it together, and figure out who's more than likely telling you the truth and which one of them is giving you the better price.
And the other thing being proactive gives you, because I ran into this recently, our dishwasher is misbehaving. And it's still not completely dead, but we're choosing not to use it because I'm afraid of what's going to happen when it finally blows up.
Water damage is expensive.
But my wife and I went ahead and like preemptively said, it's not broken yet. It hasn't flooded the kitchen. Let's go ahead and go get a replacement on order so we can get what we want. We can get it delivered. We can get this problem dealt with. And being proactive means you have the time ahead of the day you're supposed to leave on your trip to go shop multiple mechanics and get the work done and so on and so forth. It's an engineering saying, if you do not engineer a failure point, the item will engineer it for you.
There's a maintenance saying that's very common with that as well. If you don't make time for maintenance, maintenance will make time for itself.
Yes.
It will.
I mean, 100%. If you neglect anything long enough, it will always misbehave, and it will misbehave at the least opportune time humanly possible. Not that,
and probably the most expensive way.
Yeah. More times than I would like to admit when I was younger and stupider, I've been working on a vehicle on a weekend before I had to go out of town. But I learned eventually.
You know what's a good one too? The week before your road trip, not the day before, fill up with gas and make sure your fuel gauge is still working.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. I had a slightly different problem. I filled up the day I was going on a road trip, and that happened to be what killed my fuel filter.
Oh.
On an early 90s Chevy S10 pickup. Guess where the fuel filter is located, Phil?
Above the fuel tank on the frame rail.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
guess how you change the fuel filter?
You either take the bed off or you lower the gas tank.
I borrowed a Sawzall from another guy on the side of the road.
You installed an inspection panel.
I installed an inspection panel in my S10.
Did you do it the right way? Did you do it the right way with hinges and everything? No, you just cut a hole.
No. I just cut a hole in it and then finished driving where I was going and fixed it on the back end by putting a bed liner over top of it.
I can't even be upset about that because, like,
Look, I bought that pickup for a load of scrap that my grandpa traded to the guy, and about $1.50. That pickup was fine with the inspection panel as it was.
sounds like an appropriate fix for
An
an
appropriate
old.
first truck fix.
Yes.
Yeah, but
All right.
anything you can do ahead of time to assess the condition of your vehicle or assess the condition of a vehicle accessory. Heck, check and make sure that you actually put your wrench set back in the truck after the last time you rotated your tires. Because, I was going to a gun show with a buddy of mine about 10 or 12 years ago. We were in his vehicle. He got a flat. No problem. Easy fix. We swap out the flat for the spare, go to the gun show, come back home. About 2 weeks later, he calls me and says, "Hey, man, do you know what happened to my lug wrench?" Guess where that got left?
Bed of the truck?
Either on the bed, on the bumper, or the side of the road. We've never seen it again. He had another flat going somewhere else. I don't remember where, but he didn't have his lug wrench or any of the other tools because one of us, probably me, knowing me, I'm scatterbrained, left that thing on the side of the road or the back of the truck and drove away.
Also, a pro gamer tip: if buying a used vehicle, or hell, even a new vehicle, make sure you have all of your tools, because let's just say I might have seen more than one used vehicle
sold
in my
without
life.
the lug wrench.
Listen, I'm telling
or
you,
at least a locking key.
Especially
those new things.
Yeah, especially used vehicles. You have to check for that, because I'm gonna tell you that the dealership almost certainly didn't when they bought it, and the detailer sure didn't, and if it got detailed at all. And if you don't check either, then see, here's the thing: is if you check and you knows it's missing, you're probably not going to get it. You might be able to argue a couple of bucks off, but you need to go fix that problem.
Or you know what? Tell them, hey, throw it in, it makes the sale. They'll spend the $40 to buy the kit. Actually, it'll probably be cheaper for them. It'll probably be $20, and they'll throw it in.
Yeah. I mean, worst come to worst, go to a junkyard, find a vehicle just like yours. I can almost promise you the spare tire tools are still in it.
They are still under the driver's seat or in the back. Yep.
Yes, 110%. So the point remains, like, just make sure you have all those things. And if you're driving a beat up old thing like I used to way back in the day, and even for my current vehicle, I have lots of water in the truck, in case we get stuck, and it can go into the radiator if it absolutely has to. And I also have, like, a quart of oil and a little thing of brake fluid and so on and so forth. Like, it just pays to have all that stuff.
Yeah, especially if you're going on a 500 or 600 mile road trip or 1,000-mile road trip, or heaven forbid you're going on a cross country road trip like you used to see in the movies everyone do. I don't actually know anyone that's done that.
I plan to one day.
Right. You always hear that. College kids, oh, it'd be cool to go do that, like they see in the movies. I don't know that I've ever seen anyone do that. If anybody has, shoot us a message on the Patreon chat or in the comments. Be interesting to hear how that went for you.
My wife and I have talked about maybe when Piper's a little bit older and it's just the two of us, like go do like about a 2-week tour through the Midwest, and like make a big old circuit through that area and then come back home and just camp, book spots at campgrounds and
for sure
do that whole thing.
I mean, you could do it with nothing but KOAs. I mean, my God, those things are everywhere.
Yeah. But we're 10 minutes over, and I do need to wrap this up. That's all right. It was a good conversation. I mean, we started with Phil's interesting military experience that I hope nobody ever has to fall back on. And if you do, then it's been a really bad day. Yeah. And I hope we've ended with like some good pre-flight checks you can do before a road trip, because some of us are about to be going to Saluda, North Carolina in a couple of weeks, and let's call it what it is. Everybody gets on the road sooner or later, and when you do, the last thing you want to do is be stuck on the side of the road between Pig's Knuckle and Bumfuck in the middle of nowhere, having to figure out how to deal with a problem you should have dealt with in your driveway.
Exactly. Murphy's always going to come knocking at the worst time.
God. If you haven't met Private Murphy yet, consider your life
You know,
on
I
the up and up.
actually know a guy whose last name is Murphy. He's in the Air Force. Remind me later, I'll tell you about Murphy. That dude has the worst luck of anybody I've ever met and the perfect name.
I mean, the perfect name if you're an airman with bad luck.
Oh, yeah, and he is.
All right, let's go ahead and punt this one out the door. So, for those of you who are watching the stream, we have a stream that we recorded earlier this week that's scheduled for next week. It's pre-recorded, it's not live. You're welcome to leave us comments. We're just not going to be able to respond to them because we're not going to actually be here. But 2 weeks from today, we will be back live. And I wish I could tell you what we're going to talk about, but I'm not there yet. And Prepper Camp is coming up very quickly. It's 3 weeks from today. I'll be on the road, and y'all may have to wait until late Friday morning to get your normal podcast episode because Andrew and I are probably going to record it at Prepper Camp in the middle of nowhere, and then I'm going to test the cell phone towers and see if I get lucky enough to get an upload out. Last year behaved itself. We put out a morning show Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that weekend at Prepper Camp. It was a ton of fun, and hopefully we're going to be able to pull it off again.
Should be great.
All right. Well, Matter of Facts podcast heading out the door. Good night, everybody. Keep the shiny side up. Keep the tires on the ground, and watch out for Murphy. Bye, everybody.
Later.